I've got some really interesting news for you with the A9 Mark III. We've talked about this camera an awful lot on this channel, especially this year, and this video is no exception. This video is dedicated to the Sony A9 Mark III, the successor to the A9 Mark II, which was released back in October of 2019. In previous rumors, it's been stated by Sony Alpha Rumors that this camera is most likely due to be refreshed later this year in Q3 or Q4, which would put it at about 3 years old. And it certainly makes sense. It's plausible. A camera of this caliber to be refreshed right around the 3-year mark certainly makes sense. It's not uncommon with Sony, Canon, and Nikon to refresh these professional level cameras between the 2 to 4 year mark, with the flagships usually on a 4-year refresh. I have some serious doubts to the accuracy of these rumors for several reasons. One, the release date. It's the summer, not of 2022, not of 2023, but 2024, in time for the Summer Olympics. In 2024, 2 years away from today. And I know what you're thinking. Okay, well, that's not completely unrealistic. We had to wait 5 years for the Sony a7S III and update to the a7S II. 5 whole years where people doubted the camera was going to be refreshed. I get that. And that's certainly plausible. We might have to wait 5 years. But here's the thing. Sony's very good at protecting their information, not letting things leak out. We definitely don't get detailed leaks 2 years prior to a major camera being released. And when I show you the specifications, tell you about the specifications for the A9 Mark III, I think you're going to find that they're a little bit too detailed for a camera that's due to be released in about 2 years. So take these rumors with a grain of salt and let's have some fun with them. So first off, the sensor in this camera, the rumor says that it's going to have a 25 megapixel full frame sensor. Not as high as some would hope. So I know many of you are hoping for a 26 to 30 megapixel sensor. What is also absent from this rumor that I would have expected is it to state that it's going to be a backside illuminated stacked sensor. Not surprising, since that's what Sony's putting in all their mid-level to high-level or flagship end cameras. I'm willing to call that the A9 Mark III, whenever it comes out with whatever specifications, is going to have a backside illuminated stacked sensor. In terms of frames per second, 30 frames per second, lossless, 14-bit RAW. It's going to have the same autofocus and auto exposure as the Alpha 1. That's good as well. And as far as live view, it's going to support up to 240 frames per second, but the resolution in the EVF, it'll be down. Now, they don't mention what it's going to be, but currently, Sony's throwing in 9.44 million dots in all their EVFs. So I would expect that this would be less than that. Now, I don't know where a lot of cameras get by perfectly on around 4 or 5 million dots, and I don't think that would be a huge loss. What matters more is blackout free and be able to do it with a high refresh rate, so you don't get that weird ghosting effect on some cameras that have a slower refresh rate. And that's pretty much it for stills. Now, the video side of things are very interesting. As far as video goes, based on a 25 megapixel sensor, of course, it makes sense that it is going to do full sensor readout 6.2K video. That's what the rumor says. So 6.2K video or a Super 35 with a 1.5 times crop. And that's going to give you a 4.1K oversampled 4K. I know what you're thinking. Wouldn't it be better to just have 6.2K oversampled 4K and not deal with a crop? I think so, but I think this is designed using the Sony cripple hammer to protect their other cameras. But wait, there's more. 4K up to 120 frames per second, but it's going to have a Super 35 crop of 1.6 times. Now, each of these modes is going to be 10-bit 422, and it's going to be XAVC, HS, S, and SI. So really interesting, the video frame rates here, resolutions for this camera. I think 6.2K is fine. It's a non-standard rate, but to me, it would make more sense to do 6K video and then offer a 6.2K oversampled 4K. These Super 35 crops just seem to not make a whole lot of sense. And I think what they're designed for is to, again, protect the a7S III, to protect some other cameras, because I don't think Sony's going to refresh the a7S III or the FX3 for a long time. We had to wait 5 years for those cameras to come out. So I'm really curious about this. Let me just see if I've left anything out. So I've got the date. Yep, we talked about autofocus, auto exposure. Oh, one thing I did leave out, flash sync up to 1/400th of a second. So these are very interesting. So we've heard an awful lot of rumors out for the A9 Mark III. Which ones do I think are the most plausible? Well, in terms of timelines, I still think that the end of this year or the beginning of next year makes sense for the A9 Mark III. That would put it at the 3-year mark. I really can't see Sony waiting 5 years to update their high-end cameras. There's an awful lot of competition. Canon released the R3, and yes, I get it. This camera doesn't make an awful lot of sense in terms of pricing, in terms of capabilities, but when you look at the Nikon Z9, we look at the Canon R5, we can see that we've got some very, very powerful cameras out on the market. And Canon is due to update their R1, their full-frame mirrorless flagship camera, and that's expected to be announced in the fourth quarter of 2022. So the end of this year, we might get shipping in the first half of 2023, maybe January, maybe sometime between January and March. So for Sony to wait a total of 5 years to refresh the A9 Mark III, I don't think so. I think there's enough competition, and we saw this with the Sony a7S III. The reason why Sony took so long to refresh that camera, in Sony's own words, well, there wasn't enough out there in competition to justify releasing the a7S III. And I think the opposite is going on now. We see Nikon, we see Canon releasing very, very powerful cameras. And if the rumors are true that the Canon R1 is going to be, in Canon's words, the master of everything, I can't see Sony waiting 5 years for the A9 Mark III. And to have this level of detailed leaked specifications 2 years in advance, if, and this is a big if they're still planning on announcing this camera, releasing it in time for the 2024 Olympics, I believe they're still working on this camera. I believe they're going to wait to see what the R1 has before they completely finalize it. To me, this doesn't make a whole lot of sense, but I'm only one voice talking in the wilderness. What do you think? When do you think the A9 Mark III is going to come out? What do you think of these rumored specifications or leaked specifications? And what do you think the A9 Mark III is going to be able to deliver? And what do you think it's going to do in terms of, because we've got to look at the cameras around it. We got the Alpha 1, which came out last year, so it's not due for a refresh. The A9 Mark III is the next high-end camera that's really due for a refresh. And the A7S III or the FX3, they're very similar cameras. We have to wait 5 years for those, so I can't see those getting updated in the next year or so. I think we're probably going to have to wait a little longer for the A7S III to be updated, although it's been about 2 years now. It depends on when the R5 gets announced too, and what is the R5 Mark II going to be? There's a lot of questions here. But the rumors, they're an awful lot of fun, and I'm going to pay very close attention to this. Maybe I'll reach out to my friend Andrea and see what he thinks of the credibility of this rumor. He gets some really interesting rumors, and sometimes he doesn't know if they're valid, if he hasn't been able to validate them, and he'll just throw them out saying, look, here's a source. This is what I'm hearing. I haven't been able to validate it. You guys let me know what you think. And that's what I'm doing for you right now, because I really don't have a lot of confidence in this rumor about the A9 Mark III, but I'm starting to ramble. I'm starting to babble because, to be honest with you, it's almost 11 o'clock here at night. I'm a little bit tired, and I think I'm just getting a little bit punchy, and hopefully through this entire video, I haven't made any silly mistakes like call the A7S III the A7R5, or I haven't accidentally called the A9 Mark III the A9 II, or whatever. It happens sometimes. And again, these are rumors. Have fun with it. I try to give you my analysis and opinion based on what I think, how realistic this is. And from what I've seen of covering Sony over the last couple of years, I'm sure there's some kernel of truth in there somewhere, but I'm not buying this. But if you want to stay on top of the latest rumors coming out for the A9 Mark III or any other stills hybrid camera out there, whether it be Sony, Canon, Nikon, Pentax, Olympus, go ahead and subscribe and choose all notifications. So as soon as the news comes out, you'll know. Thanks so much for watching. We'll see you again soon.